Okay, to start things off with our first unit, we always take a look at the scientific method. But before we can actually do that, we need to first look and talk about science in general. So what exactly is science? We can define science as an organized way of using evidence to learn about the natural world. And these words, organized, is very important, the organized way. We have to be organized in science. Without organization, a lot of the different things within science actually would not take place. Evidence. Evidence is also very crucial in science. We call this data. And data is actually what drives our scientific discoveries. And the natural world. In other words, we are looking at things that actually exist in the world that we experience, not like the world of science fiction like Star Wars or Star Trek. Now, related to science and the scientific method are three words that kind of are very closely related to each other: observations, inferences, and hypotheses. And so I think it's important that we take a little bit of time here at the beginning to differentiate among these three words. So the first one we're going to look at is observation. Observation are any fact or information that we obtain using our senses. So this is our sense of sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. The only one we won't ever use in our laboratory situations is taste because of the safety factor. When we make an observation, we create what's called empirical data. This is direct data that we get from our experiments. This isn't something that we have to calculate. It is directly, we directly take it from our experiments. Now, observations create two types of data or two types of observations: quantitative as well as qualitative. So let's take a minute and kind of differentiate between these two. Quantitative observations lead to quantitative data. And this is any observation that involves numbers, like 2 milliliters, 4.2 inches, or 75 pencils. Qualitative data, on the other hand, comes from qualitative observations, and these are the types that are not easily measured. These are things like color, size, shape, and texture. Now, looking at these two, many students actually think that the quantitative type of data is more important than the qualitative type. And it really is depending on the situation. It's not 100% qualitative is always right, or better, or quantitative. We tend to use quantitative a little bit more in science. However, qualitative definitely has its place. Looking for a change in color oftentimes is a great indication of something that is happening or not happening in an experiment. Texture also can really tell us a lot about what is happening within our experiment. What we have to understand, though, is no matter if it's a quantitative observation or qualitative observation, by themselves observations have little meaning. We generally follow them with an inference. So, what is an inference? An inference is a way of interpreting those observations based on our prior knowledge and experience. So, we take the evidence, the data that we collect from our observations, and we interpret them. And what this does is it helps us draw a conclusion. For instance, if I see something that is crystalline in nature, that is kind of clear or maybe whitish, I might make an inference that it's either salt or sugar, just as an example. I'm drawing on my prior knowledge and experience and working with those two substances and comparing it to what I'm seeing in front of me. The last word that we want to work with is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a possible explanation for a set of observations or an answer to a scientific question. What a hypothesis does is it tries to explain the evidence. So we see something and we try to explain why that's happening. We often describe this as an educated guess. Now, two words that a hypothesis should always have in it are if and then. So if we see this happening, then this is what is going on, or this is why it is happening. That's what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis can arise from prior knowledge, so we can actually take inferences that we've made and make a guess based on that prior knowledge and experience. A logical inference, and these are the two that we're really going to use the most here in this class. There is a third type, and this is the imaginative guess. These have a place in science, especially when we are exploring new frontiers, like for instance determining the structure of DNA. The hypothesis that actually led to the discovery of that was an imaginative guess. No matter how we create that hypothesis, though, well, we have to keep in mind that these are useful only when they can be tested. If we can't test the hypothesis, then it really doesn't do us a lot of good. Okay. So in our next section, talking about the scientific method, we will actually go through the steps of the scientific method and outline exactly how scientists use the scientific method.